I'm Nigel, and I got no idea what I'm doing. Today, bonnet. And that bonnet has, as near as I can tell, about 20 dings on it, all of which need to be bogged up. So, the first thing to do was mark all of the dings so I didn't miss any. Then, with some fairly rough sanding pads, I scratched up the paintwork on the dings, which should give the body filler a better surface to adhere to. Then, after a bit of masking the panels I didn't want to paint, I cleaned the surface in preparation for the bog. The bog has to be mixed with the hardener in a very specific ratio, so it's worth paying attention to the instructions. I use an old kitchen scale to get the mix right. It's also vital to make sure the two parts are mixed really well. It should end up with a nice uniform colour, with no streaks at all. If in doubt, mix some more. The bog is applied with a plastic scraper, pushing down with enough force to get the bog deep into the scratches and push out any air bubbles. It's a bit of a trick. The bog will start to slowly harden as you are working, so you need to be relatively fast. But at the same time, you need to be careful to get the bog as smooth as possible. It's also tempting to put more on than you need and fix it up later. Unfortunately, you do tend to regret that when it comes to sanding it back. I found it better to do the bogging in smaller batches. While the first batch is curing, you can get on with the next section. This half of the bonnet seems to have more dings, but at least they're not as deep. After an hour or two of curing time, the next step is sanding. Starting with a fairly coarse grade of sandpaper, I worked my way through each section, always trusting my sense of touch more than my sight. Because of the different colours, it's very easy to miss something by vision alone. Anyway, there's more sanding, working down to finer and finer grades of paper. Just when you think you're done, you change to the next grade and start all over again. But sooner or later, the sanding's done. I masked up the car and applied a spray putty. This stuff is like a very light bog that you can spray on like paint, and it's good for filling up tiny imperfections. Also, it has a nice uniform colour, so it does make it easier to see how it all looks. Now, I lied before when I said I was done sanding. With a fine sandpaper, I sanded back a heap of the spray putty and ended up with a nice smooth finish. Then, more masking, another clean with wax and grease remover, and it was time to apply the primer. This stuff makes it easier for the final paint to bond to the surface. Once the primer was dry, I sprayed on a bit of top coat. This isn't the final surface, so I wasn't too worried about getting it right. When that was dry, it was time to tidy up. Look over the job, and then play with the slow motion mode on the camera. Bonnet, done. It's far from good, but good from far. We'll see you next time.